We need to talk about UFOs, UAP, drones, or whatever you want to call it. It's happening. Yeah, we need to talk about this. It's happening all around the world. There's all kinds of things coming out, and of course a lot of people, they get like lost in the woods out there, and so therefore I made this episode, and also next episode is going to be a two-part episode. We're going to dive into the weeds of it, so stick around and yeah, let's get into it. All right, first up, President Dwight Eisenhower. I'm going to start with him. Is a very important figure to understand that all of this. He's the 34th president of the United States. He was very important during the World War II when he had a position as a Supreme Allied Commander, and he was leading the D-Day in Europe, which was important for the Second World War. Important man to understand a little bit about what's happening here. He had a very interesting position, and as his presidency later on, well, he mostly maintained peace between the communist bloc and the free world, as we call it. The reason why I want to talk about him mostly is because what he said when he said goodbye to everybody. So let's have a look.
We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations.
This was 1961.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Right, so what is he saying there? He's saying that after World War II and while his time during his presidency, he saw a lot of money and spending going to the military industrial complex. Well, the military industrial complex, there wasn't a term that was known very well back then. Today is getting some more recognition, and there's some spooky stories going around. But you could see that there was a lot of different spending going on here. You could see that from his position. To understand what happened later on, I want to go skip a couple of years and go to a different president, namely this one. Who is this? This is Ronald Reagan, of course. Ronald Reagan, he was the 40th president of the United States. He took a hard stance against the Soviet Union. He's also credited a lot with well, the downfall of that. Well, at the same time, he was a very conservative president. He had what they called Reaganomics, which meant tax cuts. It meant also economic growth. Yeah, you could see who benefited from it. The economic inequality also took a rise because of that, because you get income inequality by doing that. But yeah, he was famed for it, and he was also booed off the stage for it. But the most important thing that happened here in the context that we're going to talk about today is that it increased military spending. His presidency had a big military spending. And yeah, just to have a comparison, I want to have a look at a speech that he made.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity.
This is 25 years later.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, Is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
Now, isn't that peculiar for such a conservative president to have a speech about fantasizing about an alien threat just to unite all of the world surrounding us? And this is not the only one he said it. He said it twice as far as I could see it. Yeah, but this is the one at the United Nations. So very interesting. All the countries are listening and he's talking about an alien threat. Well, that's very interesting. Now, why do you think that would be? It's not an uncommon idea. Sometimes you hear it floating around every now and then, like, oh, maybe if what would unite us all if that the aliens would attack us and then we would all be one world, one unity. Well, there's been some thinking about this. And to understand that, we need to go to Dr. Carol S. Rosin. Well, who's Dr. Rosin? Well, Dr. Rosin, and she has a doctorate. She has a doctorate in the humanities. And she was a teacher before she was employed by the United States. She worked together with former Nazi Wernher von Braun. When the Second World War, after it ended, Americans, they took all the scientists, and the Russians, they took all the factories and everything. The United States, they took Dr. Wernher von Braun and they made him build a rocket. And that was the reason why he was important in the whole space era that came afterwards. His assistant was Dr. Carol Rosin. She now is she speaks out very openly about peace. She's very much against the weaponization of space. You might think weaponization in space, is that something that's really going on? Well, let's have a look.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosin. In 1974, after being a sixth grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun, in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space." And I said, you know, teachers don't stop until June. He said, "No, you have to understand, this is February, and we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies," he said, "against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids." And then he would repeat to me over and over, "And the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat." Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies.
Could it be that Ronald Reagan was actually priming the countries of the rest of the world for an idea to come about? What do you think? Let me know what you think about Ronald Reagan. Leave a comment down below. Anyway, this is what Dr. Rosin says, and she's been saying this for a long time, and she still sticks by it. If this idea exists around that we are gonna get attacked by aliens at some point, then you gotta do it very plausible, right? Who's gonna fool anybody out there with virtual reality out there and like with all the CGI that we have right now? Like, we're very used to all kind of things. So if we see something in reality, it has to be real, hasn't it? How are we gonna do that? Well, for that, let's get to the next person I want to discuss. And his name is David Grusch. Well, who's David Grusch? Well, David Grusch is a former US intelligence officer at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So he's an intelligence officer, so kind of like CIA, FBI, all of these things, except he was at the NGA. He was a representative for the UAP task force, which was called into action in 2021. He discovered a whole bunch of things. Before that, he was a US Air Force major, so he knows a lot about how the Air Force works, and he also has a bachelor in physics. He's quite capable of understanding what's going on if we're talking about things that are out there, that are flying around there.
At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it.
Multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. What does that mean? That means that people are out there looking for crashed alien vehicles, taking them back to a military base and reverse engineering them so that they can make one of them themselves. Yes, this is the actual hearing what is going on in Congress right now. This is an official testimony under oath, and Congress is interested. What would we be without our sponsors? And of course, we're very happy for our sponsors to be part of this show. In this case, it's organicacbd.com, where you can buy these fantastic flasks of CBD oil that you can get in all different kind of percentages. You can get them 10%, 20%, 30%, or like extremely good quality CBD oil, not something you just get at a local grocery or anything like that. No, this is top premium quality. So if you need anything like that, for instance, if you need like something to help you get sleep, or something to help you get rid of some pain, of some chronic issues that you have, or maybe some menstrual cramps, maybe for your lady or your wife or whatever. Personally, I use it for my dog. My dog is an American Stafford, and she has some, well, let's say skin issues that comes with the breed. There's some melanoma involved, and so yeah, of course I cannot make any medical claims about that, but you know, I just give it to her, and who knows, it might help. So yeah, if you have any kind of issues like that, I recommend CBD oil from organicacbd.com. Go there, use the code Paradigm Shift, you get a 5% discount, and over 100 euros you get also free shipping. So check them out, cbdorganica.com, use the code Paradigm Shift, and let's get back into the regular episode. Let's hear another one.
All right. Okay, Mr. Elizondo, you stated in your testimony that, quote, advanced technologies not by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe, end quote. If these technologies are not made by any government, who's making them? Private companies, or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human intelligence?
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years, before, to put this in perspective, when
are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
It may be both.
Okay.
When it comes to Blue Force Technologies, I would not be able to discuss.
Okay. Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?
We would have to have a conversation in a closed session, ma'am. I signed documentation 3 years ago that restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals. I submitted for my book through the DOPSR process, which took a year for it to be reviewed. And what is in the book is what I was told I'm allowed to talk about.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes.
That's two people confirming that the United States has a secret program that is actually reverse engineering UAPs for their own benefit, trying to make one of them themselves. Now, the interesting thing is that the government is asking these questions. Meanwhile, the government doesn't know what it's doing. So here we kind of get this understanding that, you know, the United States government is not just a government of a country. It's not that simple. There's the government, and then there's this different thing, which is operating with government license, with a connection with all different kinds of private companies in a kind of middle space, kind of like a non-legislative NGO kind of operation. They're being funded by a taxpayer. There's even talk about them being funded by inventions coming out of these crash retrieval programs, such as, for instance, high-speed fiber optics. They might have come originally from UFOs that they crash retrieved. It's a possibility. I'm not saying it is, but it's a very intriguing possibility if we look at how our technology is developing so quickly. Where is that technology coming from? Well, there definitely, almost definitely, is the understanding of external technology as we're understanding right now. Let's look at something else. So what we're looking at right here is a document that is evidence of a conversation that took place between two people. One of them is the former director of the DIA, which is Admiral Thomas Wilson, and the other one is Dr. Eric Davis, who is a physicist and an aerospace engineer. And they apparently had a conversation. Let's have a look.
And then finally, are you aware of a document? And then finally, are you aware of a document that appeared around 2019, sometimes called the Admiral Wilson Memo or EW Note?
All right. Okay.
And then finally, are you aware of a document that appeared around 2019, sometimes called the Admiral Wilson Memo or EW Notes Memo?
I am not.
You're not.
I'm not
These
personally
are
aware of that.
government
Okay.
officials.
The leaked memo reveals an alleged covert meeting with former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Vice Admiral Thomas R. Wilson, an astrophysicist and aerospace engineer, Dr. Eric Davis, about an ultra-secret UAP crash retrieval program. According to the memo, the meeting took place in the back parking lot of a United States national defense contractor involved with some of the government's most sensitive technologies. Vice Admiral Wilson prefaced the meeting with the following caveat. If you blow my trust, I'll deny meeting you, deny everything said, won't meet with any more people without clearances. Too risky. Never seen anything like this program in Black programs community. A reverse engineering program, something recovered years ago in the past, called themselves the Watch Committee, or gatekeepers. An isolated group using their own facilities and cleared personnel, about 400 to 800 workers. No White House names, no president, no congressional people, no congressional staffers. They had a craft, an intact craft they believed could fly. The program manager said they didn't know where it was from. They had some ideas on this. It was technology that was not of this earth. Not made by man. Not by human hands.
So you're not aware of that?
I'm not aware, Congressman.
In my 10 seconds remaining, then, I guess I just would ask, Mr. Chairman, unanimous consent to enter that memo into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
So that memo has entered the record, and people are gonna look at that, and people are gonna think something of it. By the way, that clip is from a fantastic documentary called The Program by James Fox. I absolutely recommend you go and watch it, because there's some very interesting things in there. But yeah, that memo could be one of the most important things that's out there of an official meeting that happened between two people, somewhat of a disclosure, understanding what is going on here. There is apparently a craft that is of non-human origin that has been studied to be able to reverse engineer. I mean, it completely corroborates what is being said by David Grusch. And so what we're doing here is we're piecing all these puzzles together here to understand, okay, how is this working and why is this working? How come that this has always been pushed into the fringes and now we're going to get it out there in the open? We're going to see if we can lay this puzzle all together so that we can make sense of it. What we're seeing here is a shadow government operating, taking all of this technology for themselves to manipulate humanity. Now that is not what we're out here to do in this world, is it? This technology, especially if it comes from external sources, should belong to all of humanity. All right, let's see what else we have to talk about. Now, this person has completely been made ridiculous ever since he started telling what he knows. And who is this? This is Bob Lazar. And Bob Lazar is a self-made propulsion expert. Well, what does it mean? Well, that means that he's able to understand propulsion. And you can see evidence of that because over here you see a car that he adjusted himself. And what you can see at the back, there's a rocket at the back. So this car is rocket powered. So if you want to drive it with high speeds, you just simply turn on the rocket and the car goes really, really fast. Now, he claims to have degrees in physics and electronics from MIT and at Caltech, but these records, they have disappeared somewhere along the way. Now, that's not very normal for records where you study to disappear. However, if you understand the people that we're dealing with, it's not unthinkable that your records might just disappear once they want to discredit you. However, if you can build a rocket-fueled car from scratch in your garage, which is what he did, then I'm kind of willing to accept that you're a propulsion expert. And I'm also willing to accept that they reached out to him so that they could get him to work on these UFO crafts that he's talking about. That's his story. He said that he worked at S4 near Area 51 in Nevada. And this is the particular thing that he worked on. It's a craft that he calls the sports model. There's some drawings that he made from it. He even signed those. It supposedly comes from extraterrestrial origins. Now, this is the one that he worked on the most. But at one day, he was working in a hangar or a hangar, or I don't know what the English way is to pronounce that, but usually they were compartmentalized and he only worked on the one that he was supposed to work on. But one day he came in and all the side walls, they were up and he saw multiple ones. So he was working on multiple crafts that were retrieved at some point. And his job was trying to figure out how they worked, try to reverse engineer them. And this particular one, he said, it was very small. It was like it was meant to be for a smaller person, somewhat like a child or something like that. And there's also something else that he talked about, which is very interesting. Let's have a look.
So they still have these things, supposedly.
I would guess. I mean, I don't have any information on that.
Have you ever asked anyone that has any inkling of any idea of where they got them or how they got them?
No, but something must have been said to me from Barry. But it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig. So it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig.
Whoa.
So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
That'd be a great Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Right?
As all of it would, yeah.
That tripped me out when he said that for the first time.
Yeah, that's a freak out right there. Just a couple of dudes with some brushes looking for a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone. They hit metal.
And when did they find it? You know, that they have 9 of them.
Yeah. Well, and how could we have not heard about that? What about the guys with the brushes? How could you uncover something like that?
Well, that's very true. How could you cover up an archaeological dig? Well, you must have very much governmental power to be able to cover up something like that. I mean, all of the people with all the brushes, they need to be silenced and they cannot tell anything what they found. Also, Joe says here that they're digging up dinosaur bones. Dinosaur bones, they don't come from archaeological digs. Dinosaur bones, they come out of stones. So that means that it's not that ancient. If they found it in the ground somewhere, it's probably a couple of tens of thousands, maybe 20,000 years ago. That means that what is in our history, the way that we think about evolution, it might very well be different. And all of these stories about ancient people coming here and adapting DNA, you know, the Anunnaki stories or the stories in the Vimanas from India, the Vedic literature, the original Adam and Eve story, God taking the rib of Adam and from the bone marrow extracting the DNA to make another human, to make Eve, it might very well be that we're talking about aliens here. So that's a very important issue here, but it's an important seed right there. It's an important thing to take along with us in our understanding of the new paradigm shift. Next up, I want to talk about Dr. Stephen Greer. He's a retired emergency physician, so that means he was in the ER basically. He's able to fix you up once you come into the emergency room with a shot wound or whatever is happening to you. He's a good guy to have around you, I think. What happened to him is that basically he got through some family friends and his uncle who worked at the aerospace company and some friends who are Rockefellers. It's important to mention that. They kind of fed him information which he came to understand a lot of this, and ever since that he's been on the path to try to expose all of this, and he's been fighting for disclosure. He's been working on the Disclosure Project, made the Center of Study for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is very much connected to his CE5 protocol. So he basically developed a protocol in which you meditate and you can communicate with alien life forms out there. Now that's something I want to jump into a little bit more in our next episode. So I'm going to save that for part 2. But in general, he's been trying to release more information out there. And I want to have a look at something that he published recently.
So, one of the things that I love is this sort of thing. Now, this is just a page out of the briefing document for the president and members of Congress. It's 320 some pages, something. And this has an illustration, and you'll see on the left side ET craft, and on the right the man-made ones. And we have several pages of these. The reason we put that in there is because most people, even if you're fairly close up, if you don't know what to look for, you're going to think an object is alien or NHI craft, non-human intelligence craft, when it's actually came out of the Raytheon, or it came out of the Lockheed Skunk Works or Northrop Grumman. And if you look at the illustrations that we have from our whistleblower, TE, who was on a retrieval team, his first retrievals were UFOs, UAPs, that were these triangular objects that were from Northrop Grumman and Raytheon. They were not alien or NHI at all. So this we have known now for a very, very long time. But what we have found is that there are certain people out there who are embedded counterintelligence officers and disinformation functionaries who go to members of Congress or White House people or the media and say, we don't have anything like that. Therefore, anything that looks alien is alien. And that then opens the door to all the staged false alien events that are scary to be rubber stamped as NHI alien when it's not. And it absolutely isn't. That is the biggest part of the secrecy. And I think that is why, if you look at the testimony, we can show the illustration of this big 300-foot diameter craft that the Marine platoon member back in 2009 encountered in Indonesia, Michael Herrera. And if you look at that craft, and I don't have it here in front of me, but that thing was 300 feet across. It was manned. And the way it left after they were almost killed, they were packaging up humans in crates to use in human experimentation back home. And these were Americans who were like mercenary type guys operating this 300-foot diameter craft. The way it left, it was like a spark off a flying wheel. It went up. It was a little bit of transformer sound, like a humming. Went up and then boom, over the horizon in a couple seconds at 100,000 miles per hour, something like that. Now, that was in 2009. And that craft, if it came over Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles, 99.999999999 out to how many decibels, percentage of the population would say it's an alien craft.
Yeah, I mean, how could the public know any different? They're seeing a UFO. They're seeing something that they don't have in their current paradigm. And so immediately they think, well, then it's the other thing. Then it's an alien. Then it's something that I've seen on TV. And so all of this allows this military industrial complex organization to fly under the radar, through the radar. But even if they're above the radar, people have no idea what they're looking at. Our other sponsor of today, of course, it's druidsecret.com. The secrets of the Druid, all at your doorstep with just a few simple clicks. Go to druidsecret.com and you can find all different kind of things that they have. They have the CBD oil, of course, but they also have the HHC oil, which I promoted in some other episodes. They also have lion's mane, which I also talked about, which is very good for your brain capacity and all of that. They even have the blue lotus from the ancient Egyptian culture. So if you're interested in all that kind of stuff, go check them out. It's a fantastic website. It's a mom and pop store. It's not one of those big industries that try to make a lot of money with CBD oil or anything like that. No, this is premium quality at a local source. All of them very, very good quality, and you can get them everywhere around the world. They ship it everywhere, so free shipping. Over 100 euros. Use the code Paradigm Shift at checkout. Go there, you get a 5% discount. You're helping out the show, you're helping out the local mom and pop store, and you're also helping out yourself because you also need good quality medicine, and that's what we're standing for. All right, let's get back to a regular episode. And so I want to dive a little bit more into the case of Michael Herrera that Dr. Greer talked about. And he didn't show the picture, but I can. So this is Michael Herrera. He was with the US Marine Corps ever since the early 2000s, and he stopped in 2009. He was deployed to Padang City after the Sumatra earthquake, and he gave a testimony of an octagonal craft that had gravity control capabilities. And in his testimony, he talks about that he saw unmarked US personnel and they were involved in human trafficking. They were crating up people, they were loading them into this octagonal kind of shaped craft. And this is what happened in Indonesia. And then there's this artist impression of what it looks like, and it looks something like this. Whenever you're seeing something like this out there in the jungle, you don't think that these are aliens. You know that these are not aliens. These are people doing this. All right, next up, Commander David Fravor is a very reliable eyewitness. He served 24 years in the US Navy, of which he did the last 18 years as a fighter jet pilot. And he retired in 2006, and in 2004 he was flying a FA-18F Super Hornet during a training mission above the Pacific coast. He saw what would later become part of the Nimitz UFO encounter that was aboard the USS Nimitz. And what he saw is he saw this. And you can see it on the screen. There's a video about it, but there's an artist impression as well, just to get an understanding of what it looked like. We featured this before in our witness interview of a Dutch UFO. I showed this to them and they were like amazed at what they saw. This is an impression of what it looked like, and it looked like a Tic Tac, like one of those candies. And it went all across the world because he's such a reliable witness. So we're not dealing with, John, the grocer who saw something amazing. All of the people that I'm featuring right here, from their background, the very credible, reliable people who have been trained to observe, to see something, to describe something, to witness something, and to report on it. And that's why we're featuring all these people. So what happened later on afterwards is Eric Tabor came forth. Now Eric Tabor, he didn't see anything himself, but after the Tic Tac story came out, he started reporting that he had an uncle. He was the great nephew of Sam Urquhart, who was a Area 51 contractor. Now he's a defense aerospace contractor himself. And so he worked on all kinds of stuff. And from that position, he started talking too. So let's see what he says.
I moved to the West Coast in 2012. No family west of the Mississippi. My grandmother was nice enough to let me know that I had a great uncle named Sam Urquhart. He told me that he worked at Area 51 from 1997 until 2014. Stayed working there as EG&G evolved through a merger with Raytheon, I believe, into the company known as JT3, and then retired in 2014 as JT3 transitioned into JT4. He said, when I first got there in 1997, I had a personal conversation with a senior EG&G engineer whose group was tasked with trying to reverse engineer, figure out an object that was brought there by some CIA people in the 1980s, and it was supposedly found just resting in a remote desert location, fully intact. And the senior EG&G engineer described to my great uncle that it was egg-shaped, about the size of a SUV, smooth and seamless, metallic looking, silverish gray in color, no control surfaces, no flaps, no inlet, no exhaust. It showed up on x-ray as a solid object. They tried to penetrate the hull, try to open it. They couldn't. They said that they were able to take some very small samples of the material. I'm not an expert in chemistry, but I guess the isotope ratio or the mixture of elements, they concluded it was not made on Earth.
Right, they reported on an egg-shaped form. Now, I don't know if it was white or if it was metallic, as you saw the artist impression that you saw earlier in the video, but he's not the only one who ever saw an egg-shaped form. We have officers Kenny Graham and Kenny Downs. Both Kennys are sitting in a helicopter and they're officers of the Jefferson County Police Department. They're on duty, they're sitting in a helicopter. It is March 3 on 1993 and they're seeing an egg-shaped, unidentified flying object.
Shortly before midnight last Friday night, officers Kenny Graham and Kenny Downs were aboard this Jefferson County police helicopter. They were flying over the site of a suspected break-in near Sanford Avenue and Buchel Bank Road when they encountered something very strange.
It appeared to be some type of egg, a pear-shaped object with a glow inside.
The officers were flying a Jefferson County police helicopter at the scene of a suspected break-in near Buchel Bank Road when they saw that egg, pear-shaped object.
When the light at that time appeared on it, it just started floating towards the helicopter.
The UFO, about the size of a basketball, began making loops while the officers did their best to keep them within sight, but not too close, as both chopper and whatever traveled at around 100 miles an hour.
I know it was traveling at speeds I'd never seen before.
And suddenly, the UFO turned on its pursuer.
It shot 3 fireballs out, and just the lights went out, and it come at us, and he turned the helicopter, and it was gone.
The officers still don't know what it was they saw or what happened to it, but today GE employee Dwayne Hitchler was called in to fill a mysterious hole near where the encounter took place.
There was no apparent reason for it to be there, you know.
Dwayne says the mysterious hole was just about the size of a basketball, just like the UFO.
I believe that it was maybe an egg or something that was in the ground that hatched, you know, and just came up out of the ground and took off.
Once they returned to base, officers Graham and Downs made a full report to their commanding officer.
There's no doubt in my mind that there was an object out there. What it is, I don't know.
The lieutenant and his men say they simply don't know exactly what it was they encountered.
Yeah, so what a story. And it's completely underreported. I mean, this is a local news station. There's these officers in a helicopter. They see this thing, which is the size of a basketball. It's small, but it fires fireballs at them. They're following it, and at a certain point, once it fires at them, they make a maneuver and they turn around and it's disappeared. And apparently there's this other witness who said, I found this thing in the ground and it's basketball shaped, which is amazing if you find that in the same area. So what is going on here? It's like this object, it goes through the sky and it also goes through the ground. So what do you think? Is this an alien reproduction vehicle or is it an actual alien craft? Well, I want to add something more to that because there's more egg stories. How about this one? Officer Lonnie Zamora. Officer Lonnie Zamora, he was chasing a high-speed vehicle when all of a sudden he saw something next to the road. And he thought that it was a car that was flipped over. Except it wasn't a car, because once he got closer, he saw these people in white uniforms. Now, I don't know how close he saw, but here's an artist impression of what it was. that is definitely egg-shaped and is definitely bigger than a car. Now that's the third egg that we're talking about. Now, recently something new came out. News Nation, they had a very interesting guest coming on, and they combined it with some other footage that they had received from a helicopter pilot who is flying an egg on a string in a saddle, and it appears to be from a retrieval program. Let's see if we can have a look at that. There you have it. I mean, that is definitely an egg-shaped form. Now this is News Nation's footage, so I don't want to do too much with it, but it's very interesting things going on. So that's the fourth egg-shaped testimony that we have here. Now, lastly, I want to talk about this guy, which is Jake Barber. And Jake Barber was the guy who was interviewed by News Nation, which they combined with the release of this footage that you just saw. Jake Barber has an amazing story. His credentials are very well understood. He is an airspace mechanic, which means that he's able to take apart a helicopter. He was part of the US Air Force Special Operations. That means that he gets to fly around presidents and all that kind of stuff. He had a special security clearance from NATO because of his works in Bosnia, and he was recruited for an elite combat control unit, which he was a part of, or at least he was an apprentice of. And later on, he flew as a non-officially deployed pilot for the US Department of Defense and the intelligence community. And in that position, he flew around an egg, and he testifies that he also said an egg. So that's the sixth egg that we have here on this story. And now you understand why I'm focusing on these eggs. So all of these egg-shaped UFO, they appear to be either of an extraterrestrial source, or they appear to have some other kind of intelligence around it. Now, the one that from Eric Tabor, it was not able to be scanned by an X-ray. They could only see it as a solid object. So very interesting things going on here. Now, the testimony of Jake Barber is much more interesting that we're going to talk about today, because he not only saw an egg, he also saw an octagonal object, and that was definitely of an extraterrestrial source. But we're not going to talk about that in this episode. We're going to save that to next episode. In the meanwhile, if you haven't seen this interview yet, I very much recommend that you watch it, the News Nation episode. I also recommend you go and watch the program. Very interesting things coming out, and we're trying to lay this puzzle here. We're trying to lay it all together. But I think that one thing that we definitely established with all of these testimonies, with Jake Barber saying that I work for this kind of project, with the memo coming out, with David Grusch saying this is true, we can definitely say that there is a program out there that is retrieving alien vehicles, and that they are trying to backward engineer them into something that they can fly themselves, and they might have been doing that for the last century. So all of that said, with the understanding that this has been going on, we now have to backward engineer our entire history of the last century of what has been going on behind the scenes. And that is why we're discussing it. So I hope you found this episode interesting, and I hope you found it useful in understanding what has been going on. Now, we're gonna help you lay this puzzle, and we're gonna try to figure out what has been going on all the way from our ancient history all the way to the current present, to the future. Because if this story has any credibility, then we're gonna see more events such as what happened in New Jersey last Christmas, or we're gonna find more interesting things coming out. And so if you found any of this useful, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Make sure that we get more subscribers out there. Make sure that you hit that like. Also, I'd be very interested to talk to you guys about this. What do you think? What information have you found? Put that all in that comment section down below, because I want to know what you guys think about it. So all of that said, don't forget that we have a Patreon out there that you can go to, which is patreon.com/paradigmshift for you, because we're doing this for you. And also, Don't forget to visit our sponsors organica-cbd.com and also druidsecret.com. If you want to stay healthy, if you need anything out there to get your brain into the right mode, then go there. And with that being said, we'll see you next week for part 2. Bye-bye.